How an ordinary decision led to extraordinary scale. It began with a choice so routine that no one thought to question it. A simple adjustment, a small operational tweak. The kind of decision companies make every day without expecting anything more than a slight improvement. Yet hidden inside that ordinary moment was the seed of a transformation no one could have predicted. Every great story in business has a hinge point, a moment that appears insignificant until time reveals its true weight. And in this case, the decision wasn't made in a boardroom or during a high-stakes meeting. It happened quietly, almost accidentally, far from the spotlight of strategy or vision. But sometimes the smallest hinge swings the largest door. To understand how this decision gained power, we must return to a time when the company felt stuck. Growth had stalled. Competitors pushed ahead with bold features and flashy announcements. The market shifted in unpredictable ways while internal meetings circled the same ideas. The company wasn't failing, but it certainly wasn't rising. So the team made a change, not radical, not brave, just practical. A small operational realignment meant to lighten workloads, reduce friction, or streamline a process that had grown clumsy over time. No one imagined it could do more than ease a few internal headaches. But the world outside their walls had evolved faster than they realized. Customers were adopting new behaviors. Technology was accelerating. The competitive landscape was shifting in subtle, powerful ways. And when the company implemented that tiny change, it aligned perfectly, almost accidentally, with the direction the market was already moving. This is where the reveal begins. Because what looked like an ordinary decision quietly unlocked a chain reaction. One adjustment improved a workflow. That workflow enabled a new feature. That feature attracted curious users. Those users brought new data. And before anyone could fully understand why, the company began growing again. Slowly at first, then with unmistakable acceleration. The team didn't set out to scale. They simply made a choice that happened to sit at the exact intersection of market need and internal readiness. And in that intersection, the extraordinary began to take shape. The change spread through the company quietly at first. A process that once required hours now took minutes. A bottleneck that frustrated teams for years dissolved overnight. The small improvement created space. Space to think, to experiment, to respond more quickly to shifts in customer behavior. And that space became the birthplace of the reveal. As teams adapted, the ripple expanded. Engineers found themselves able to ship updates faster. Designers tested new ideas without waiting weeks for approvals. Customer support saw patterns sooner, feeding insights back into product development. The simple adjustment wasn't just saving time, it was accelerating the company's ability to learn. The reveal sharpened. Early adopters noticed small enhancements appearing more frequently. Their feedback flowed directly into the newly streamlined workflow, creating a cycle of iteration that felt effortless compared to the sluggish pace of the past. Engagement rose, churn dipped. Customers sensed a new energy in the product, something faster, more responsive, more aligned with how they actually used it. Inside leadership circles, curiosity gave way to surprise. The metrics showed improvements in places unrelated to the original decision. Growth returned in areas the company had long abandoned. A small tweak was influencing the entire machinery of the business. But with progress came pressure. As momentum increased, teams pushed themselves harder, eager to build on the unexpected success. The freedom created by the operational shift also exposed long-ignored inefficiencies elsewhere. Systems built years earlier were suddenly too slow for the new pace. Manual processes cracked under rising demand. And what began as a quiet acceleration now felt like a race, one the company was not fully prepared to run. The conflict emerged. Resources stretched thin. Priorities collided. Some teams wanted to double down on the new features enabled by the change. Others insisted they needed to reinforce the infrastructure before scaling further. Leadership worried that pushing too fast might break the very systems that were finally moving in the right direction. Tension grew as internal debates escalated. Should they harness the unexpected momentum and sprint, hoping to outrun competitors? Or should they slow down, risking the loss of their newfound energy? The decision became heavier with each passing week, because while the small change unlocked incredible potential, it also revealed a truth the company had ignored for too long. They were still held back by old structures, fragile systems that had once supported them but now threatened to collapse under the weight of growth. And just as the team prepared to capitalize on their rising trajectory, a structural flaw emerged, a hidden limitation buried deep within their legacy infrastructure, a flaw that threatened to stop their acceleration cold, and confronting it would determine whether their extraordinary scale was sustainable or merely a temporary surge. The flaw revealed itself at the height of their acceleration, a moment when everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. A routine systems test, triggered by the surge of new activity, exposed a delay so slight it was almost invisible. But as engineers dug deeper, that tiny delay expanded into a warning signal pulsing through the architecture. Something underneath the surface was straining. At first, they believed it was a minor issue, a quick fix, a simple optimization. But the more they investigated, the more the truth emerged. The company's rapid growth was colliding with a legacy component buried so deep in the system that most of the current team had never even touched it. A module built in the earliest days of the product, when scale was a distant dream and efficiency mattered more than resilience. The conflict erupted quickly. Every team suddenly felt the pressure. Engineers scrambled to trace the bottleneck. Product managers froze their feature roadmaps. Designers paused experiments they had just begun to enjoy. Leadership demanded answers that no one could give yet. And as logs poured in and graphs spiked with inconsistencies, the uncomfortable reality became unavoidable. The growth that had revived the company was now pushing them toward a breaking point. The emotional tension grew sharper with each passing hour. The old component throttled performance unpredictably. Sometimes it handled the load, sometimes it didn't. And that unpredictability made the system fragile. Fragile enough that one wrong push could spark an outage capable of eroding all the trust they had recently rebuilt. Inside war room meetings, debates intensified. Some argued for quick patches, insisting they couldn't afford to slow momentum. Others pushed for a full rebuild, warning that patching would only delay a larger collapse. But rebuilding meant touching parts of the system no one fully understood, risking disruptions that could be worse than the flaw itself. Meanwhile, outside the company, customers were beginning to notice subtle signs of strain. Delayed responses, slower features, moments of inconsistency. Not enough to cause outrage, but enough to raise questions. And in a competitive landscape where alternatives were only a click away, questions were dangerous. But the true emotional peak arrived when a late-night stress simulation finally exposed the full consequences of ignoring the flaw. The system buckled, collapsing under a load that represented only a fraction of their projected growth. Had this happened during live traffic, the damage could have been catastrophic. Shock rippled through the room. The team understood instantly. Their extraordinary scale wasn't built on a solid foundation. It was balanced on top of a weak point capable of undoing everything they had achieved. In that moment, the path forward became clear. Not safe, not simple, but necessary. The old foundation had to be confronted. The flaw had to be removed. And the company had to rebuild the part of its identity it had avoided for far too long. What came next would determine whether their rise continued or collapsed under the weight of its own momentum. They approached the reconstruction with the understanding that this was no longer just a technical fix. It was a reckoning with everything the company had postponed, tolerated, or ignored in the years leading up to their sudden acceleration. The legacy component that once seemed harmless now stood revealed as the gatekeeper to their future. And if they wanted to keep rising, they had to remove it before it collapsed beneath them. The team divided into focused units, each tasked with dismantling part of the old architecture. It felt like peeling back layers of history. Every line of code they touched carried a memory. Quick hacks added to meet old deadlines, temporary patches that had become permanent, assumptions made in an era when no one imagined scale would ever matter. And with every discovery, the same truth resurfaced. The company had grown too quickly on foundations built for a different world. Rebuilding the core meant shutting down systems, redirecting traffic, and taking risks that made executives wince with every update. The company prepared its customers for potential turbulence, knowing that transparency was the only way to maintain trust through instability. Still, the tension was palpable. The team was walking a tightrope suspended over years of fragility. But as the pieces came apart, something unexpected began to happen. The new system, designed from scratch with modern constraints in mind, snapped together with a clarity none of them anticipated. The workflows that once felt rigid became fluid. The data paths that once choked under pressure now moved with precision. Each test ran cleaner than the last, revealing the benefits of a foundation finally aligned with their ambition. And then, after weeks of careful reconstruction, they ran the full-scale stress test. The graphs that once spiked into chaos now held steady. Load curves flattened. Performance soared. The bottleneck that nearly destroyed their rise had vanished, replaced by a structure capable of carrying the weight of global demand. Silence filled the room, but this time it was the silence of disbelief, relief, and the unmistakable feeling that everything had just changed. The climax arrived quickly. As the rebuilt system rolled out to customers, response times improved dramatically. Features launched faster. Reliability hit new highs. Analysts noticed. Users noticed. Even competitors noticed. What began as an ordinary decision months earlier had now evolved into a fully transformed ecosystem. One built not on luck, but on the courage to confront the weakness hidden beneath their success. In the aftermath, the company understood that extraordinary scale isn't the result of momentum alone. It's the result of choosing to face the fractures that momentum reveals. The ordinary decision had opened a door. The flaw had forced them to walk through it, and the rebuild had given them a foundation worthy of the future they were racing toward. Progress, they learned, isn't just about moving faster. It's about understanding what must change so that movement can continue, not just today, but for years to come. How an